Taehyung spotted alone? Did Jungkook refuse to join him at Celine's Paris dinner? Has something unthinkable happened to one of the most beloved friendships in modern music as the flashes exploded across the entrance of the Petit Palais in Paris? Kim Taehyung, V of BTS, emerged alone, his expression composed but unmistakably distant. No familiar silhouette walked beside him. No second wave of applause greeted another member of the world's biggest group. Instead, the gilded entrance to Celine's exclusive pre-show dinner seemed almost too big for just one man to fill, and so the question has ignited a firestorm that no publicist, no carefully worded press release, no polite reassurance can extinguish. Did Jungkook refuse to join Taehyung in Paris? In any other moment, the absence of a friend might have seemed inconsequential. But this is not any other moment. This is BTS, whose members built their legend on an image of unbreakable brotherhood, whose bond has been sold to the world as the antidote to an industry famous for tearing artists apart. For more than a decade, that bond has felt unshakable, and yet, there he was, Taehyung, stepping into the Celine dinner alone, beneath the cavernous chandeliers that flickered like camera bulbs overhead. The questions began before he even reached the grand staircase. Why was Jungkook missing? Why did no one from Big Hit clarify whether he'd been invited? Why did Taehyung's team look so determined to keep moving, ignoring every shouted inquiry about whether Jungkook was en route? In a single evening, what should have been a triumphant return to the fashion stage transformed into the most painful guessing game the fandom has ever known. Because it wasn't just any event. This was the first official Paris appearance for Taehyung since completing his military service. A milestone every army had waited for, counting down the days until his return to the spotlight. To see him arrive alone felt like a subtle fracture in a story that had always been about solidarity, and as the hours have passed, the speculation has only deepened. Did Jungkook decline the invitation out of scheduling conflicts, or was there something more deliberate behind his absence? Was this the first visible sign that the members' paths are finally beginning to diverge? Or is this simply the reality of growing older, of becoming individuals after years of being a singular force? If you listen closely to the voices that erupted across social media, you will hear the fear pulsing beneath every argument. Has BTS's bond finally begun to fade? On Twitter, the reactions were instant and raw. He looked so alone. One fan wrote, their post shared thousands of times in a single hour. I've never seen Taehyung walk into a big event without at least one member by his side. Others were less sympathetic, accusing Jungkook of selfishness, of abandoning his friend on a night that was supposed to celebrate not only Celine's empire but Taehyung's own resilience. But for every angry voice, there was another pleading for understanding. Maybe he couldn't come, they argued. Maybe he wanted to, but schedules or contracts or something else made it impossible. Yet the longer the silence stretched, the more the narrative began to slip beyond anyone's control, because in the vacuum of facts, speculation becomes irresistible, and nowhere is that clearer than in the countless edits flooding TikTok, where fans have spliced together years of footage. Taehyung and Jungkook laughing backstage, embracing on stage, whispering in each other's ears as though the rest of the world didn't exist. Over these images, a new soundtrack plays, the solemn realization that time changes even the closest bonds. What happened to them? Was this absence a conscious choice, the first public admission that their dynamic has shifted forever? Or is this nothing more than the cruel trick of perception, a single empty space beside Taehyung magnified into a symbol of something that was never truly lost? The truth, for now, is hidden. Neither Taehyung's team nor Big Hit has responded to requests for comment. No statements have clarified whether Jungkook was invited, expected, or even considered. And in that silence, the fandom has filled in the blanks with every fear and hope it can project. Look carefully at the footage. Taehyung ascending the steps alone, and you might see something that feels too vulnerable to name. A flicker in his expression as the cameras flash. The way he pauses before entering the grand hall, as if searching the crowd for a familiar face. Does he find it? Or does he resign himself to the fact that tonight, he must navigate the spectacle alone? This is the detail fans can't stop replaying, because no matter how carefully curated their public images have become, No matter how many contracts and brands and millions of eyes now define them, there is still the memory of two boys who once clung to each other like life rafts, and now one of them has stepped into the most lavish night of his career with no one to catch his eye and smile. For many, that image feels like an ending. But is it? Or is this simply the evolution every bond must undergo, moving from a shared identity to two individuals finding their own paths in the echo of the Petit Palais as chandeliers glittered overhead and the Celine logo gleamed from every gilded wall? No one could answer that question, least of all the man at the center of as Taehyung posed for the cameras, his expression composed but not quite bright. You could almost feel the collective ache of everyone who has ever believed in the myth of unbreakable brotherhood. Was it always a myth? Or does this moment prove that even the strongest connections can be tested when the world insists on turning them into currency? And if the bond is fracturing, who among us has the right to expect otherwise? The hours have stretched into days, and the speculation has only grown more fevered. Some say this was deliberate, a quiet signal that Taehyung is ready to step into the next phase of his career alone, unburdened by the expectations that have followed him since debut. Others argue that Jungkook's absence was a simple, unremarkable conflict of schedules, blown out of proportion by a fandom desperate to find hidden meaning. But even the most measured explanations can't soothe the ache left by that footage. Because when you have invested a decade in believing that some friendships are too sacred to fracture, the sight of one friend walking alone feels like a betrayal, even if it isn't. And so we keep watching. We watch the video again and again, searching for any sign that this is temporary, that Jungkook will appear at the next event, that the world will see them together and exhale a collective sigh of relief. Until then, the question remains, did Jungkook refuse to join Taehyung, or was it never his place to begin with? No one knows. And perhaps that uncertainty is the most painful revelation of all. Because the only thing more terrifying than watching your idols drift apart is realizing they were never yours to keep together in the first place. The longer you stare at the footage, the more the questions multiply. Because the truth is, no matter how many angles you watch, no matter how many times you rewind, no one can see what's happening inside Taehyung's mind as he lifts his gaze to the glittering archway of the Petit Palais. Was he expecting to see Jungkook slip through the crowd at the last minute, the way he has so many times before, their reunion hidden just behind the velvet ropes? Did he search for a familiar silhouette in the sea of cameras, scanning the faces of strangers for the one person who could make the night feel less monumental and less lonely? Or was he prepared for this, ready to stand alone at the summit of luxury and spectacle, determined to prove that he no longer needs anyone to steady him as the flashbulbs explode? For the thousands of fans who have turned this moment into the most analyzed clip in recent memory, the question has become more than curiosity. It is a kind of grief, because whether you are willing to admit it or not, there is something profoundly unsettling about watching the man who once seemed inseparable from his closest friend now arriving without him, every step echoing in a hall too big for just one person. I ask this independence. Or is this the first undeniable proof that time and fame eventually change everything? Even the relationships that once felt unbreakable as Paris Fashion Week unfurled in all its opulence. The speculation only grew more relentless. Every new sighting of Taehyung alone, exiting the Celine dinner, slipping into a waiting car with no one beside him, appearing at the after-party with only staff for company, became fuel for the wildfires spreading across social media. Where is Jungkook? The question ricocheted across platforms in every language, attached to every conceivable theory. On Twitter, threads dissected flight records, alleging that Jungkook had been spotted boarding a plane bound for Europe 2 days prior, only to disappear without explanation. Some insisted he was in Paris all along, hiding in plain sight, perhaps avoiding the spectacle out of respect for Taehyung's solo spotlight. Others speculated something darker, that a rift has opened between them, a silent fracture born of years of shared pressure and the crushing expectation that they would remain inseparable forever. I asked that fair? Of course not. But the truth rarely matters once a story takes on a life of its own. Fans began posting side-by-side images, photos of Taehyung and Jungkook in their earliest days, clinging to each other in backstage corridors, and footage of Taehyung alone on that Paris night. Expressions so carefully controlled it hurt to look at. The captions said everything. What happened to them? When did the distance start? Is this the price of growing up? For older armies, the footage felt like a mirror reflecting their own evolution, because maybe that is why this moment has cut so deep. Why the absence of one man at a fashion show can feel like a personal heartbreak. BTS has never just been a group. It has been a promise that even when everything else changed, when you lost jobs or moved cities or outgrew friendships, these 7 men would remain exactly as they were. A unit, a family, a fixed point you could trust not to dissolve. And so, watching Taehyung step into the most glittering night of his career without Jungkook feels like the unraveling of that promise, even if it is only an illusion. Even if nothing has changed behind the scenes, because the human heart has never been rational, and fandom is, at its core, an act of hope. The more time passes, the more the speculation calcifies into certainty in some corners of the internet. Some insist they've seen the proof. A grainy photo allegedly captured at Charles de Gaulle Airport shows a man in a black mask with Jungkook's posture and tattoos, surrounded by staff who look suspiciously familiar. Was he really there, just out of frame, choosing to remain hidden so that Taehyung could have his moment? Or is this wishful thinking? A desperate attempt to patch the fracture before it becomes too big to ignore? And if Jungkook truly was in Paris, but didn't join Taehyung at the Petit Palais, what does that mean? Is that compassion, or is it avoidance? Some fans believe this was a strategic decision, a deliberate choice to avoid overshadowing Taehyung's first solo appearance at a luxury event since his military discharge. After all, no one can deny that Jungkook's presence would have dominated headlines. The two of them together would have been too powerful a story, too tempting for every outlet desperate to declare BTS's reunion underway. Others argue that this is a fantasy designed to protect the illusion of harmony, because in the footage of Taehyung arriving, there is something unmistakably final about his demeanor. He is elegant, he is poised, but he is also alone for many. That last detail is the one that will not stop echoing, and so the theories persist, mutating with every passing hour. Some claim that tension has been brewing since before enlistment, that beneath the polished performances and affectionate banter lay differences no one dared acknowledge. Others point to the rigors of solo schedules, the inevitable drift that occurs when young men become global brands, each tasked with sustaining an empire too massive for anyone to bear alone. But what if it's neither? What if this is simply the cost of success? An unglamorous reality where the people you love most sometimes can't stand beside you, no matter how much they wish they could. What if the real tragedy isn't that the bond is broken, but that it must evolve in ways none of us can witness? That idea, more than any tabloid headline or viral rumor, may be the hardest truth for fans to accept, because even as the world speculates, Taehyung remains silent. He has not posted a single clarification. Jungkook has offered no explanation. Big Hit has released no statements, and so every unanswered question becomes a wound that refuses to heal. For fans who have clung to the idea that BTS's friendships are untouchable, this moment has become a reckoning. Because no matter how many times you replay the footage, the reality remains. On the night when the world gathered to celebrate Taehyung's return, he walked into the lights alone, and no one has told us why.